Hello, everyone. I have wanted to do a kind of podcast for a while, summing up at the end of the videos of each country, because when you're filming YouTube videos, you can only really talk for about a minute before you imagine people start getting bored, and then you have to kind of move on and, cut in a montage. And recently on Instagram, I made a reel kind of talking about my experience in Pakistan and India with the recent bombing that happened. And I was talking, to kind of cut it short in case you haven't seen it, talking about how heavy the Indian media is constantly reporting about Pakistan, and how when you talk to Indians about Pakistan, almost all the time, pretty much anyone you ask, especially the North Indian Hindus, they have quite a lot of vitriol for Pakistanis. And when you talk to Pakistanis about India, I spoke to many people saying, "Oh yeah, after this I'm going into India, I'm cycling around the world, blah blah blah." I didn't hear a single bad thing said about India. And in each country, I'm speaking to 50 to 100 people a day. And I was in Pakistan for 2 months and India for, I think, just over 7 weeks, something like that in total. In India, my time was split up going into Nepal and then coming back out of the other side going into Northeast India. So I had a few questions on my Instagram that I will answer. But first, I thought it'd be sensible just to kind of go over my time in each country and kind of give a general overview of where I went and what I did. So for anyone new, I have cycled Europe and Africa from Kenya to Cape Town before. I went back to the UK, and prior to flying to Pakistan, I'd been saving money for almost 2 years, working as a bike courier. While I was doing that, I ended up buying a cargo bike, the kind of large, weird bike I travel with. I got it very cheap and was expecting to sell it on, but realized it was light enough that I could travel with it. And I then kind of realized that no one else had cycled around the world before, and I had enough left of the world to cycle that if I flew to Pakistan and did Pakistan to Australia, and then after that I'll do the Americas from Alaska to Argentina, that still counts as like officially cycling around the world. So I decided to do it with that. Officially cycling around the world is doing the distance of the equator around the Earth or more. So I flew to Karachi mid-September. I had a few days off in Karachi. I wanted to cycle up from there, but wasn't able to. I'd spoken to a few police officers and they thought it was a bit risky. So I got a train up to Rahim Yar Khan, and I met Roshan Khan, who is a TikToker. I found him on Instagram Reels, and I'd offered to bring him some like American and European sweets from the UK. His channel is basically like trying different food products and drinks and so on, or just trying things for the first time. I wasn't expecting to film with him. I thought we would maybe like hang out, get a biryani, and then I'd get back on the train. But he ended up kind of inviting me around. He had like a whole big thing planned, and we had a lovely couple of days together. It was extremely hot. I think it was like 45 degrees, which is the hottest weather I'd ever been in. I know Pakistanis will be used to that, but coming from cold, rainy, wet London, it was quite a shock. After that, I got a bus up to Islamabad, and I decided to start cycling from there. I wanted to go and see the mountains in Pakistan more than anything in the country. I really enjoyed Islamabad. So I left some things with a friend of Roshan's in Islamabad. So I luckily had quite a light bike setup and I headed out north. Quickly, I got stopped by the police again, which will be a running theme for my time in Pakistan. I will read a WhatsApp message I sent to Roshan, who was my kind of like go-to guide. If anything weird was happening, I would ask Roshan. And he also very kindly offered his kind of like translation services to talk to the police if needed. This is the message I sent. I got pulled over by some police in the early evening. I expected to find a guest house in the town before, but the only one was too expensive. The only guest house I found was like $110 or something like that. I then cycled on with it getting dark, was going to ask at a restaurant if I could buy food and then camp behind the building as I'd done in other countries. Then two guys dressed in black pulled me over and said they were police. I wasn't sure though because they didn't have police uniform. They said there's terrorists here now and I need to go back to Islamabad now. When it was 6 p.m. it was fully dark and I was on like a countryside road. After showing passport and everything, I asked, please, can I try to find a hotel? And eventually they agreed. I pushed the bike up the mountain to the closest one and they said 35,000 Pakistani rupees. I think that's like $90. I can't remember off the top of my head. For a small single room for one night. Also, the hotel wasn't like a super lush place. It was they had like a tennis court, but it was kind of like half built. So yeah, the price was crazy for that. One worker then offered to let me stay at his, and they said I should leave my bike at the hotel. This has all been, no one there could really speak English. It was only like a few words, a little bit with Google Translate, so I wasn't really sure what was going on. We walked 5 minutes down the hill to his house. I don't know why I needed to leave my bike at the hotel, but okay. We had dinner and a nice evening. Then the hotel called me and asked, why is the bike still here? I hadn't given my number to any other people. So I was a bit worried that this hotel somehow had my number. And then I realized they'd called the police. I'll just continue talking. It's easier than reading. And then the police showed up, and this lovely guy from the hotel who had offered to host me was like sweating and was really worried that the police were coming. Luckily, the police that showed up ended up being really nice, and they got me to cycle up the mountain, following them on their in their jeep, going much faster than I would like, but that was okay. And I had a really nice night at the hotel. The police in Pakistan will be a running theme. I think though that was the biggest kind of problem I had in traveling there, and they made it fairly problematic unless I was like in a city. I think Pakistan is very travelable if you're getting buses or trains to city, because you can go around and do what you want. And looking back with hindsight, when I was in areas of Pakistan that were quite risky, on the border with Afghanistan, the police I met were like super on it, really, really professional, coordinated. But I found that when I went into the mountains, in the safer parts, going up into Kashmir towards Gilgit and Skardu, then there would be quite a lot of police officers, normally uncles, who would take it as an opportunity to kind of either try and scam me, or I had to get lots of lifts, but they would kind of like force my bike into the back of the Jeep, scratches, and then you get driven not even 10 kilometers and you have to get into a new Jeep, and it just happens over and over again. So in general, I would not recommend cycling in Pakistan. But I think if you're a foreigner, I think you can get away with going there on a motorbike. I would just recommend trying to blend in as much as possible. Full face helmet, get some like Pakistani clothes, and you will still get stopped every so often. But I think if you're on a motorbike, they won't insist on like escorting you as much less anyway. So I'll try and keep this trim. I cycled up. I was planning to go to Skardu, but I met quite a lot of cyclists coming the other way down from China. And lots of them were saying, oh, winter's coming. You know, the passes are going to close. I ended up doing like a 4,500 meter mountain pass, Babusar Top. And knowing that could close any week now, I cut my plans short and went straight to Gilgit. My problems with the police got worse and worse and worse. And on one of the last days before reaching Gilgit, I had lost sight of my police escort. Often, some of them were nice, but often they were very, very annoying, just shouting, hurry up, hurry up. And if you're on a heavy bike, you just can't go up these mountains. So on one of the last days, my police escort had been fairly chilled. He wasn't completely with me the whole time. And I was having some bike problems from the dust getting into my like mechanicals and all the moving parts. And I got offered a lift by some lovely truck drivers. And then I said, yes, I hopped in and just kind of disappeared. And when they were driving through areas where there were police standing around, I was kind of like ducking down. And then I got to Gilgit. And then from there, I got a local bus up to Aliabad. I saw Hunza Valley, which is one of the most beautiful places I've seen on earth. And then I ended up getting a bus back to Islamabad. Had a little rest and then cycled to Lahore. The road from Islamabad to Lahore is fairly uneventful. It's just a kind of big highway, as most Pakistanis will know. And then I had to fly to Oman because the Indians don't allow foreigners to cross the border. What you have to do to cross the border is you have to fly to India, activate your e-visa, go back to Pakistan, and then you're allowed to cross with an activated e-visa, with an activated visa in your passport. So that's what I had to do. Kind of annoying, but I enjoyed being in Oman for a day, and it gave me the opportunity to travel India by bus. So I flew to Mumbai, and then I was there during Diwali. That was really beautiful. Mumbai, I got hassled in like the absolute center, but compared to the rest of India, it was like very, very chilled. The conversation I would have with people, it got mentioned to me speaking to men and women that like Mumbai prides itself on being safer for women, and that was definitely visible compared to lots of other places I saw later on. Being Diwali, everything was kind of booked up to travel, so I had to get like the only bus I could find, and ended up going to Jaipur. I did a guided tour in Jaipur in a tuk-tuk, and that was absolutely gorgeous. One of my favorite days in India. Really, really gorgeous buildings. And then I went to Agra. I saw the Taj Mahal. Agra is not a nice place to go around. Like there were so many scams and small problems. I cannot talk about everyone because I'll just be here for hours. But I saw the Taj Mahal at least, and then decided like I can't do it anymore. I'd been in India for a couple of weeks, and I just had no energy left. So I decided I'm going to get just a direct train all the way back to Amritsar on the border, get my bike, and then I'll come back in and hopefully it'll be better, because when you're on a bike, you're more autonomous. I can, cycle into the mountains where I've heard it's chiller. The train did not turn up on the platform, and the only train that was available was going to Delhi. So I got on that. It was completely packed. I met some lovely young guys on the train who I would meet later on in India. Got dropped off in Delhi. It was quite dark. I think it was about 9 p.m. and I ended up getting mugged. I did not lose anything. I had my camera and my wallet in my pockets, but I kind of like, the guy tried to like tackle me, and I managed to back away, covering my pockets. And then I went to my hotel that I'd booked. The room was fairly nice, but then the hotel had like hacked my phone when I'd connected to the Wi-Fi to give themselves a good booking.com review. So yeah, just a string of like very annoying things that happened to me. And I'll speed up. I went to Amritsar in the like worst pollution on earth at the time. Went back to Lahore. I'd left my bike and my bag with one of Roshan's friends, which was very, very kind. Spent a couple of days there, and by comparison, like when you cross the border back into Pakistan, there are like any border on earth, there are like normally scammers and dodgy people at the border. But once I got back into Lahore, it was like a moment. At the same time, a friend of mine from London, a female friend who used to be my housemate, was traveling in Pakistan on her own, and we met up for the day. She went off into the mountains via buses, I think. Oh, no, she flew. And yeah, then I grabbed my bike, went back across through North India, heading towards Nepal. I went into the mountains a little bit. The main incidents I had was I had a couple of guys, 2 different occasions, proposition me for sex. Actually, it happened as well in Pakistan. The difference between, what happened on either side of the border. I've been propositioned for sex by men in quite a few countries on earth. In almost every place, it's just been polite. Normally someone who works at the hotel will ask if you want company in your room and do like a wink or something like that. And in Pakistan, no, thank you, brother. I'm flattered. I prefer the company of women. No problem. Okay. And then, yeah, good night. I don't feel at all threatened. When it happened in India, they do not take no for an answer. I say they, that's a lot of 1.4 billion people, but the general trend is people do not take no for an answer, and people will follow you if you ask them not to. And a guy on a motorbike asked if I wanted sucking. That was the only one I managed to get on camera, because I probably should, when this happens again, if it feels threatening, I probably should just get my camera out, because then they're completely diffused and stop. But in India, both times it happened, they would kind of like follow, kind of touching. One guy asked for like a photo of me, and I said okay. I was wearing tight cycling shorts. Probably shouldn't have been wearing tight cycling shorts in India. I know that now. But they're the most comfortable shorts to wear while cycling. He asked for a picture of me, and then his phone kind of went down, and he was taking a picture of my lower area. So yeah, that in India, like if there would be probably like 5 incidents a day, and then maybe like 10 just annoying things. But I'd meet probably like 2 or 3 really nice people each day in India. And I got to the Nepal border. Once you cross, again, just like crossing into Pakistan from India, crossing into Nepal from India, you immediately see the difference at the border. And it's like, everyone's polite again. It's very peaceful, calm. And yeah, I crossed through Nepal and came out the other side and went into North India and cycled up to Guwahati to fly to Thailand, because I cannot go through Myanmar. The north, by comparison, was much more chilled. My favorite memories from the Northeast. Did I say Northeast before? Yeah, I'm talking about the Northeast. My favorite memories were a group of indigenous people. I should explain the Northeast people in India, the ones that haven't, migrated for work up from central India. They look Southeast Asian because it's, genetically far more related to like Myanmar and further into Southeast Asia. My favorite memories were, I got invited to camp at a restaurant run by an indigenous group of friends, and we ended up kind of drinking whiskey. They played guitar and they were into like Metallica, some of the same bands I'm into, and we had a really, really lovely evening, all kind of playing guitar together, singing together like nothing else matters. And like these I got invited into people's houses 3 times in India, and they were like all my favorite moments, because getting off the street, you feel the kind of stress, wash away, and you see the kind of like other side of life. Like traveling in India when you're outside is just an assault on the senses. It's extremely loud. You're often getting harassed, or at the very least, just stared at. If you stop to like pump up your tire, you'll attract a ring of, 20, 30 people around you, who often won't say anything. If you like smile and say hello, often they won't. They'll have arms folded and they'll just be like sternly staring at you. These occasions where I got invited in by a Muslim family in North India. That was wonderful. I went down to their farm, and that's on a video that will be up, I think, in a couple of weeks. That was amazing. The guys I met on the train to Delhi, one of them invited me. They were Hindu, but in the Northeast, I should also mention, there's a lot more religious harmony within communities. Like a group of friends, there'll be like Hindus, Christians, ethnic Nepalis, and so on. Whereas in the central north, I heard time and time again, when I would stay somewhere that was run by, for example, a Christian family, or there's Jain, Sikh, Muslims, you would often hear like, told in confidence, very bad stories that I'd asked to film, like, oh, this is really interesting, can I film you? And they're like, no, because it's far too dangerous. People regularly get firebombed, get their businesses and houses vandalized. And as I said in my kind of reel, like living in central North India as a religious minority is incredibly stressful for the majority of people I met, because the Hindu majority are basically on top of everyone else. And if one of these small Hindu gangs, I was also accosted by these gangs. They would like stop me. I got caught in a dark alley. They were like holding my handlebars to stop me from cycling away. And they would say things like, maybe sometimes they'd film me and be like, Hindustan Zindabad, I love India. Just shouting kind of phrases at me to try and get me to say it back. And when I wouldn't, they would get more and more aggravated. I had a few of those situations. You can tell they're Hindu because these gangs will look very Hindu. They always got the bindi, and they wear far more traditional clothes, whereas not the kind of clothes I guess normal Indians will wear to just go around the city and do shopping and their normal things. So I will start answering questions now, I think, before I get sidetracked again with more stories. So the first question is, I won't put people's, usernames because if it's a question from a Pakistani person, they can get harassed online by Indians. So I'll just keep it all anonymous and just read out the questions. How did the hospitality and interactions with locals differ in both countries? So when I just talked about my experience with Pakistan now, I had spoken about the problems with the police. But by contrast, the civilians I met in Pakistan, 99.9% of people were incredibly welcoming, really, really warm and kind. I often would have trouble paying for things because people just flat out refuse your money, to the point where if you really try and pay, it just gets like awkward and kind of offensive for people. This kind of started when I met Roshan and Rahim Khan, and he like insisted on paying for everything. We'd gone to his family house and it was like 45 degrees and they didn't have air conditioning, and I was just like dripping with sweat, super dehydrated and getting heat stroke. And I was like, I'm really, really grateful, but I really need to like be in AC. Like I'm going to book a hotel. We'll still hang out for the day and then I'm just going to go and, stay in a hotel. And he was like insistent on paying for the hotel for me. And we ended up having like a kind of small argument because I could have stayed at the house. I just would have been kind of uncomfortable and like very, very hot. And I was feeling kind of like, dizzy and so on. And this kind of continued through much of the country. I was paying for my things probably like half the time. Honestly, hospitality is amazing. I feel kind of awkward getting like loads of free stuff because I feel not deserving of it. But if I have the choice of like hospitality or just lots of scamming, I'm going to pick the hospitality. But in spite of what lots of Indian comments have said, I can afford my own things, afford my own food, and I travel with a bicycle. That isn't because I can't afford other kinds of travel. It's just the way I'd like to do it. You're going at perfect speeds to see the world properly. You're more open to meeting people versus being in a car and so on. To compare Pakistan with India, the 3 times I got invited in by people to stay, extremely hospitable, really, really warm and kind. I had also maybe like 3 or 4 people kind of wave me off the road in India to kind of like offer me chai or I got bought breakfast a couple of times and had like really lovely chats with the people, because that's also a kind of refreshing change being off the streets. Because if someone's offering you chai or really wants to buy you breakfast, they're not going to be like a bad person. So my conversations with these people were really, really lovely. And when people they also had good English, and you could really understand the country better by having long form conversations. And also when I spoke to these, I don't want to say good Indians because that makes it like a good and bad thing, but when I spoke to the really kind, educated Indians, I would hear from them usually not great things about the country. When I'd speak about the things that are happening to me, that would often be echoed with them, and they'd say, yeah, it's difficult. It's like it's a country with a lot of scamming, a lot of bad people. It's like people sniping at each other. One guy was talking about trying to go on dates to eventually find someone to marry. And, he'd been scammed a few times by people telling him, oh, okay, buy the tickets of the event we're going to, and then them stealing the tickets, going to the event with someone else. I remember he told me this guy told me one story, and then he went into the event and anyway, he bought another ticket, and he saw the woman he was meant to be on a date with, and she just didn't care. She's like, yeah, I've cheated you, fuck off, that kind of thing. It's, making generalizations is really hard, but I would say generally it's a lower empathy society. It's more like dog eat dog. You've got to do what you can to hustle your way to the top. And if that means stepping on other people, then that's okay. That's the general consensus, not shared by everyone. But that was what I kind of saw from an outsider's perspective, living in it and talking to lots of different people from different walks of life. Were there any particular travel challenges that stood out to you in Pakistan versus India? So, as I said, the main problem with traveling solo or traveling without a guide in Pakistan is dealing with the police. I've already talked about that, so I won't kind of rehash the stories again. I had quite a lot of problems when I was on my own. Roshan got a bus up to Islamabad, and we went up to Chitral via bus. And when we met the police on the way, the police were far more professional near Afghanistan, where there is some danger. Roshan basically acted as my tour guide, and when the police were questioning, he was like, "Oh yeah, he's my foreigner. I'm taking up to Chitral." Then we had we were basically free to do what we wanted, and they would just call Roshan sometimes to ask where we are, what we're doing, and he would just explain, and then we would just go about our day and have fun together. So yeah, that's the big issue I think with traveling in Pakistan. Other than that, I really didn't have any logistical issues. There's always locals willing to help if you need help with finding your train or getting on your bus or finding a hotel. There were a couple of hotels that wouldn't take foreigners, but that didn't happen that much. And then if I talk about India, foreigners not getting let into hotels, that happens with maybe 80% of hotels you ask at. If you're in a big city, it happens much less because, Agra is a tourist town. Although I did get rejected by 2 or 3 hotels there before I could find one that would let me in. But when I was cycling in the countryside and I get to a small city that foreigners don't go to, I would have to ask maybe 9-10 hotels normally before being allowed to stay. And often they won't tell you no. They'll be excited to have a foreigner there, and they'll say oh yes, come in, see the room, we discuss price, agree. I'm there for 45 minutes sometimes. They want a selfie. And then after all this time, they'll say, we don't take foreigners. And I had quite a few arguments with people why would you not tell me 45 minutes ago I need to find somewhere to stay, and you've just wasted my time because you find it funny that there's a foreigner here. I spoke about the risky safety in India. Another big issue in India is foreigners aren't allowed to buy SIM cards. I've heard some foreigners have managed it if you're really lucky, but basically you can't buy a SIM card unless you apply as an Indian person. So you need an Indian friend to apply for a SIM card for them, and then you can use it. So I bought eSIMs, which are a lot more expensive and less reliable. And then often, maybe 70% of the time, maybe this was just me, but 70% of the time I didn't have signal. And then there would be local Indians who had full 5G or 4G or whatever. So yeah, the phone, the safety, and the not being able to stay at most hotels I think were the most difficult things, the most challenging things with traveling in India. How did your experiences at historical or tourist sites differ between the two countries? Um, I would say I'll start with India. Um, with some exceptions, like all the sites I went to in Jaipur were very nice. But generally speaking, if you're going to go to a tourist site or like a museum or somewhere like that, it would often just be there would be just lots of litter around. There was litter all over India in every place, a lot worse in places like Delhi and the big northern cities. Not as bad in the northeast, and better in the mountains, but still trash. But you wouldn't see the locals littering, but North Indians would come up as tourists to the mountains, and then you'd see cars of people chucking all their rubbish out the window. And that stuff piles up. Like Amritsar and Delhi looked like bomb sites in most of the city. Just trash everywhere, intense pollution. The pollution is a harder problem to fix. Most of it comes from exhaust fumes and people burning their crops. But it just all looked very dystopian often. So, yeah, often tourist sites, I kind of stopped going after a while because normally they were a letdown. And the lack of kind of civic sense added problems where, for example, I'd buy a ticket to go into a museum and there's a family sitting on these stairs to get up into the museum, and they've given no space to walk into the museum. And people are going into the museum and they're having to push the family out of the way. The family, every time this happens, are like, to the person that's walking through them, why are you sitting on the stairs of a museum? The only entrance to the museum. Obviously, people need to go in there. People behaving in that kind of way, I can't get my head around it. How? Yeah, it makes me kind of lost for words. So yeah, beautiful places in Jaipur I saw, but other than that, everything else is just kind of dirty, disappointing, and just not worth it. I honestly regret spending the amount of money I did in India. It's been one of the most expensive countries I've been to because of the hotel situation, where you have to keep going, and then eventually the only hotels that will let you in will be quite high budget. Pakistan is not spotless. Karachi's kind of dirty, but Islamabad's like very clean and modern. And when I went to tourist sites, by comparison, yeah, they were taken care of. You don't see no litter, but in the mountains, just like a fraction of what you'd see in India. You don't see big, land-filled sites of rubbish cascading down mountains as you see in India in certain places. And this is kind of questions from two different people asking slightly different but the same things. Which country looked more obsessed with the other one out of India and Pakistan? And as a Pakistani, I'm curious, why do they seem to hate us this much? Look, I know there is history, but still. As I kind of said at the start, there is like a lot of hate from the Indian news to Indians. You hear the news in different languages as you cross the country. Mostly Hindi, but I mean, I went through areas speaking like Punjabi, Assamese, Nepali in some areas, Gujarati even. Yeah, and then there'll be other languages that I don't even know the name of, local dialects as well. And when sometimes people will be listening on the radio or watching stuff on their phones, or I didn't see that much on the TV. Oh yeah, like in the hotel lobby, you'd see the news. It's just like Pakistan, 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 over and over again. It's not all of the news, but more than half, 100% without a doubt. Lots of Indian comments on my original reel said that is a lie, and they know they are lying. Like, anyone who watches the news in India knows that Pakistan comes up quite a bit. I saw the news in Pakistan, but I would say generally the public don't care about the news as much. So it wasn't really on, like, people aren't really glued to the news or to the TVs or whatever. The only difference, as I said, is when you bring up India to Pakistanis, never heard anything confrontational or bad about Indians said. Only that, like, I met families in Lahore who have been split up by the border being created because they can't travel to each other's countries, and like, oh, it's a shame. I hope there's better relations in the future. I haven't seen my sister in decades, and you'd hear that quite a lot. And India, when you say you've just come from Pakistan, either they'll go straight into like Indian nationalist mode. Oh, it's full of terrorists, blah, 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 and just regurgitating stuff they've heard on the news. Or on the lighter side, people would be shocked that when you'd say like, oh, it's actually not dangerous, it's fine. And then they'd be like surprised, like, okay, I didn't know that. I spoke about Pakistan a bit when I was socializing with Indian Muslims, and obviously there's a connection there, being a Muslim majority country of the same people that had migrated during the partition, but they wouldn't voice outright support. I think that's kind of like a sketchy kind of subject. But I made comments like, when I was in Muslim majority areas, it felt a lot safer in India, and people much less in your face grabbing. And I would say like, oh, this reminds me of Pakistan. Like, it's very peaceful here, and people just say, oh, thank you. Yeah, we have a peaceful neighborhood here. And the Muslim places I went in India were never completely Muslim. You'd get like the odd Hindu house spotted in between in these villages and so on. But to sum up, India is much more concerned with Pakistan than the other way around. I'll quickly talk about food before this gets too long. Favorite food in Pakistan. I loved the food in Pakistan. It was very meat heavy, but I'm a very meat heavy kind of guy. For foreigners watching this, like, the prices in Pakistan were amazing. I was getting like big kind of curries delivered to my hotel in Islamabad for maybe like $1.40, like 2 pots of curry, rice with chilies and spices, and then like 4 naan breads for like, $1.60, 70, like, it was crazy. And I would tip the drivers like 100 rupees, which I think is only like 30p. And when I would do that, they'd be like, yo, so I could afford to eat like a lot of really good food in Pakistan. And as I've mentioned, people would often insist on buying me things. My favorite dish I tried in Pakistan was Khalim. I'm probably saying it wrong. It was kind of like a chicken curry in the gravy, and it tasted like it's been cooked for a long time, and it was kind of like the chicken had kind of like melted into the curry, and dipping that into naan bread with some like, dipping in spicy sauce and yogurt you get as well. Absolutely delicious. I don't know the name, but they also, like, you'd see they do kind of like beef burgers, and like the uncle making it will kind of like punch an egg into the burger and then kind of lightly fry it. You'd have that, and you'd eat it always with having like a bread. I forget what they call the bread in Pakistan, but like a flat bread, and they cook it on the side of a big kind of round oven, and so the bread's always like made completely fresh. And you'd often get that as well with a kind of like minty yogurt on the side to dip in, and delicious. In India, I went a lot to a chain called Haldiram's, and everything I had from there was delicious. Haldiram's is a South Asian Indian food chain, but that wasn't always available. Pretty much everything I had in India was vegetarian, unless I was in a kind of like Muslim town, and then there would be like biryani available, or like barbecues. But generally, I was like vegan or vegetarian mostly through India. Comparing the two, I got sick more in India. I only got sick once in Pakistan, and that was I was on a bus, and people were like passing me food from the back of the bus, passed between like 6 hands, and then I was like eating the food, and everyone on the bus was going like, "Way!" So like I knew at the time this might make me ill because so many hands have touched it. So that wasn't really from eating prepared Pakistani food. Like if we're going on that, I never got sick. In India, I got sick a few times. When you're traveling and you're in smaller cities, just the food safety goes down. People preparing food will touch things with their hands that they really don't need to. Like if you buy a samosa from an uncle, he will put both of his hands on all the samosas in his basket, kind of like this, and then take one out, just touching your food for no reason. So yeah, things like that, and yeah, it's just a slightly less clean environment, quite a bit less clean environment, but just yeah. To be brutally honest, like hygiene is less important in India than it is in Pakistan, and yeah, that leads to riskier food, unfortunately. Someone's asked, how do you manage your finances? Are you rich? No, I'm not rich. By British standards, I know compared to the rest of the world, I was very, very lucky, and I really was. But by British standards, I'm kind of like lower class. I was working as a bike courier for 2 years to save up for this trip in Pakistan, and I've done that kind of work. I've taught English, not as a proper high school teacher, but like teaching English as a foreign language. I've worked in China. I've done that in a few different countries I've lived in. Done it in Portugal as well. But yeah, I've only ever earned maybe like £4 above the national minimum wage for the UK. So not poor. Like there's poor in the UK. But yeah, I grew up poor, and as an adult, I kind of put my past behind me, went out and like lived on my own, and I've worked quite a lot, worked alongside studying. But yeah, anyway, I saved for this trip £4,500, and I flew out last October, and it's like running out now, and I've switched to teaching English online to kind of get my money back up, but that pays a lot less. That's working for an American company, and you take calls. you sign up for like hour slots and you take calls and you get paid for every minute you're online. And that averages out to basically earning like $5 an hour, which is terrible. I could not live on that in the UK, not even close. But in a country like Vietnam, you can. That is enough to like keep yourself going. And traveling with a bicycle, you don't have travel costs. I have a tent with me, so I could only camp in India once. I did not camp in Pakistan, I don't think. No, I think the police wouldn't let me. But in a country like Nepal, you can camp a lot, and that really keeps costs low, where you can have a few days out in the tent and then your only cost is buying food, basically. So you can travel quite cheaply if you're willing to put up with camping. I would always rather be in a hotel, but to kind of travel the whole world, I need to camp to keep myself going. Otherwise, I'll run out of money very quickly. Last 2 questions. Hi, Oscar. Which of the 2 is safer for solo female travelers? And in which one did you see kindness? I've talked about the kind of kindness stuff. I'll specifically talk about the safety for females. My friend Katie, who I met in Lahore, I'll try not to speak like for her too much, but I remember her saying she had an incident in the Pakistani mountains, maybe even in Hunza Valley, where the uncle from a hotel asked her for sex, and then she said like no, and she went back into her room and kind of like kept herself shut in there. And I remember her saying she felt less safe than other Middle Eastern countries because she's traveled quite a lot in the rest of the Middle East. By contrast, though, I only know one woman who's visited Pakistan from the UK. I know lots of women who've been to India, and all of them have got stories. Like, at the very least, getting kind of groped or like grabbed on public transport. I would say in India, generally speaking, there isn't really the same culture of flirting as much. It's more, if you want something, you need to like really go and get it. People are very inspired by Bollywood. And I watched a few Bollywood films and I saw like quite concerning things, like people, both kind of characters in the films, both men and women, climbing into the bedroom of the person that they fancy to like kiss them awake. This wasn't just men doing that with women. It was also the other way around, where I saw that a few times, and I was thinking like, that's very concerning. People are kind of like taking that on board, that's okay. You can't, if you fancy someone, unless you're in a relationship with them or you're married, you can't break into their bedroom and, you know, kiss them awake. Obviously, educated people in India know that you can't do that, but I think definitely a lot of people are influenced by stuff like that. And as I said, people often don't like taking no for an answer. And so it just leads to this like extremely predatory culture. As I said, like as a bald white man who isn't conventionally attractive, I had incidents with men following me and asking me for sex. And for women, that would, that is and would be worse there. I only spoke to a couple of other travelers while I was there, but I met, I know like female cyclists who've gone through India, and like, there were incidents, nothing terrible. But when I was in India, some of you may have heard this in the news. There was a Spanish couple who were camping in the middle of the bush in India. They were like traveling by motorbike. A group of local men surrounded them, doing the kind of zombie stare, you know, folded arms as they do. And then the men were from the same village, but they weren't like an organized group. Like it seems like they had decided what to do there and then. But anyway, they beat them both up, and they get like 10 men gang raped this poor woman. All of the travel WhatsApp groups were like blowing up about it, because we have WhatsApp groups of different regions to keep each other safe, to help each other with visas, and we talk about when incidents have happened. I remember being in a guest house in India, I think when this had happened, or people were talking about it in the WhatsApp group, and I spoke to the auntie that ran the guest house, like, oh my god, a traveller has just been gang raped. But both her and her partner beat up, and she got gang raped. I was really, really kind of shocked by it. And the auntie said, boys will be boys. And that shocked me even more. Like you would hear stuff like that from aunties. That wasn't the only time I heard things like that, where it seems like there is, at least to some extent, a kind of accepted rape culture across the country. Definitely less in some areas, but strongest in central North India, where it's just like a way of life that, not a way of life. It's still seen as you see things in the news, but like a lot of men support other rapists, and seemingly their aunties and their mothers, sometimes at least, will support their son's right to do that to young women. And that really disgusted me. I'd heard about stuff like this before going to India, but it was worse than I'd expected. And if you'd see a young woman traveling alone in North India, you almost never saw it. But if you did, she would have like a massive weapon with her, like a baseball bat or a cricket bat or something like that. And it's a tough country for anyone living there, unless you've got loads of money. But if you're a young woman, it's really tough. There are lots of different factors there that make life tougher or less tough, and if you're traveling there solo as a woman, you would be lucky to have nothing bad happen to you. Like, at least a groping is likely. I had the same thing as a man. So for women, there's 10 times more straight men than there are gay men, or whatever the ratio is. I will finish with probably the most controversial question. Is India actually smelly all the time, as it is said by a lot of people? It is not as bad as people make out online. I did see people shitting in the streets, but nowhere near as much as that's perpetuated as a thing online. I think I saw it like twice in India. Most of the cities have poor drainage systems, and there are lots of cities that smell like shit. But Karachi also smells like shit. It's I think the difference is Pakistan has, like, Islamabad is like a very modern city. Clean, does not smell at all. But it's been built newer. I think India has the problem where you can't really like rebuild Delhi like new, because it's a very old city. Lots of cities smell of poo. You see poo everywhere. You see cow poo everywhere, and you sometimes see human poo. And in terms of people smelling, that's also less than I think you would be led to believe if you listen to what is said online. Yeah, there are people that smell like body odor sometimes, but I don't think it's that much more than like being out in the UK in the summer and you walk by someone like, oh, they smell of armpits. I don't think there's. India has a lot more people, so you're walking past far more humans. But I think, honestly, like per capita, I don't think it's much more. I don't think it's more stinky than like most European countries in the summer. People do not use deodorant, but like, yeah, it wouldn't be. I wouldn't commonly think like, oh, that guy stinks. Only sometimes. And there were some stinky guys in Pakistan, but I think just generally less. Yeah, I will end it on that bombshell. I have no idea how long I've been talking for because I've done it all in clips. If you're still here, thank you for watching, and I will do the next one of these once all of the videos from Nepal are out. Thank you again, and goodbye.